Hi everybody, it's Susan from Sunrise Quilt Studio, and today I am finishing up the flower garden quilt. And a previous video I showed you some alternative layouts that you could use to put your quilt together on my EQ8. But today I'm actually working with the quilt blocks and putting the quilt together. And now I'm not going to show every single step of the way because you all have watched me sew quilts together before. And but what I'm gonna do is to highlight some of the areas that I think might give you some tips and give you a little help on putting this quilt together. So I hope you will stick with me and I'll show you how I'm putting this quilt together. Now I have been busy sewing the flower garden quilt, getting it put together, and I kind of lost some of the beginning footage where I was sewing everything together, but I wanted to go ahead and show you some of the segments that I have together. So let me grab one here. Okay, here is the row of 4 tulip blocks together. These are the cream ones, and I wanted to show you on the back what I did with the pressing. Now when I made these blocks to begin with, I pressed all of these horizontal seams down, but to get them to fit next to each other, I did every other one and I pressed those seams up. Now on some of these, like this one is pressed open. That is because as I was sewing it, the seam flipped and I didn't realize it. And instead of ripping it out and doing it again, I just pressed the seam open all the way and just had it open for when I attached this block. I think this is where it happened because I sewed them together in groups of 2 and then sewed the 2 groups together. So this is where the seam flipped. So I just pressed it open and it was open when I sewed it to this group of 2. And then the vertical seams, I just pressed those open. So that is what I did with those. And a couple of tips: when you're sewing these together, you've got these diagonal seams that are meeting, and so when you are pinning them, if you pull one back, then you get a nested seam, so that'll help you get them in place. And go ahead and pin, but don't pin the other seam up. Go ahead and put it down, but that will get that in good alignment for you. So you got this seam, this one, and this one, and that one down there where you'll want to try that trick. Now my points came together pretty well. I'm pretty happy with them. There's like this one here isn't perfect, but from a distance you're not going to notice it, so I just let it go. I did use a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance on this, but I want to show you something else that you may need. I may need to actually go in and take a full 1/4 inch seam on this because I think these rows are just a little bit long. And I came across that while I was pinning this section together. And this is the center section here, right here. And it has the sashing on it, and this is 24.5 inches long. So when I'm pinning this, I'm having some fullness in here, and I could stretch this, but I'm not sure I want to do that. I may just take in these seams just back to a full 1/4 inch. Now everything was put together with a scant 1/4 inch, so I didn't think that would matter so much, but evidently it did, so I think I will take that in. Now the same thing with this center section. I used scant 1/4 inch, and I did a lot of pinning, and where I had diagonal seams meeting, I did that little flip of the seam allowance when I was pinning it so that the points would match up. This one was a little harder to do. These came out pretty well. This one's just a tiny bit off, but I'm not gonna worry about that. And then here's the back. I pressed these seams open where I sewed the blocks together, and this one needs a good pressing because I did flip. This seam originally was pressed this way, and I turned it this way so that I could get it to nest in with this seam here. It kind of helped out with the points. So you may find that you're having to repress your seams a little bit here and there just to get everything to go together well. So first thing I did is I sewed all my tulip block rows together, and then I took the these two rows, the one with the teal tulips, the ones with the pink, and sewed this sashing in. So this is a 12.5 inch strip of sashing, and then I attached the clover block, and I followed the diagram on the directions so that I got everything in the right placement. So I wanted to make sure I had, like, the cream block goes next to the tulip block, you can see that there, and then the teal block, the clover block, goes to the pink tulips also, so that's on the other side. So these instructions, even though I wrote them, they are really coming in handy for me as I'm putting this quilt together. And then of course there's the photo of it on the front, so that's really helpful too. And then it also, of course, it ends with a photo also of the completed quilt. So those are coming in really handy. And there's all the block instructions. So this is kind of a complex quilt as far as the amount of instructions that are in them, but it's really not too difficult. It's just, I would call this an intermediate quilt, intermediate level experience quilt. Let's see, another thing about the sashing is directional. It's not a real obvious directional fabric, but if you look at the daisies, the stems are all going in one direction. So I'm having everything go in towards the center of the quilt. So that way I'm keeping everything going the same way. So these are the two long rows with the corners on them. And then these are the short rows here, the pink and the cream. So I have those, and I'll see if this one comes in any longer or shorter. I haven't measured them, but see, my board is 24 inches. Let's see. This one should be about right. It looks like 24.5, so we should be good. So anyway, this one I don't know for certain. Was going to sew this with the seams up, but I think I'll sew it with the seams down and see if it'll take in any of the fullness. And if I wind up with having a whole bunch, like right here, I have probably an extra 1/4 inch, so that's why I think I need to sew these seams in a little tighter. There's just 3 seams, and that's not going to take in a whole lot, but I think I'll go ahead and do that and see if this will fit a little bit better. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to put as many pins in. I'm just going to put one near each seam and one on each end, and then start sewing that in. Yeah, see, this fits better, so okay. And then I'm going to turn it this way. Okay, so I'm going to go back to sewing. Okay, so here we go. So that went together a lot easier. I think if I'd have left it the way it was, I'd either have the sashing stretched out of shape, or I've had puckers here in the seam, and there's no puckers. Everything's really nice and smooth. Everything looks good as far as the points, so I'm happy with that. So now I need to try the other tulips, which are the cream and white ones, and let's see how this one comes out. And I'll go ahead and pin them on and sew them down, or re-sew the seams, whatever I feel I need to do. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is to add the horizontal sashing to that center panel, and I need about 52.5 inches for that. So I have cut 2 strips, 2.5 by width of fabric, and then I trimmed off the selvage ends, and so this gives me about 43 inches each. So I need about 10 inches extra. Now these are the pieces that I cut off from the other sashing pieces that I used for the other parts of the quilt. So I'm just gonna, instead of cutting 2 more full pieces, I'm just gonna use these, so then I have a nice big piece of fabric left over. So I'm gonna go ahead and move that out of the way. Okay, so I need 52.5 inches. Okay, so I'm going to measure from the side that has the miter on it, because I don't want that to end up at the very end. So I'm going to go ahead and, so we got 24, and this is just a rough measurement. Okay, there's 48. So I need 4.5 inches more, and that's right about here. So I have this much left, which is just a little over 6 inches. But I'm going to go ahead and do the same to this one, but instead of measuring it out on the board, I'm just going to match these up. So they each have a pin in it. And then here is the center panel. And what I want to do is to go ahead and pin these sashing on, and I want the sashing to go towards the center, because that's just, it's either on this one, it's either going towards the center of the quilt or away from it, and right, I want it to go towards the center, so that's what we're going to do here. No other reason than that's just what I feel like doing. So, okay, I'm putting pins about every 6 to 8 inches. Really nothing scientific about this. Just what I feel comfortable dealing with under the presser foot of the machine. Okay, so I wasn't too far off. I was about not quite an inch off, maybe 3/4 of an inch off when I measured. So, okay, so that's good. So now let me pin on the other side, and then it'll be ready to sew. So I have the center panel done, and now I need to attach the outer tulip sections to it. So I want to make sure I've got the right color. So this one would be the top, going by the teal. And so we're going to put them right sides together. And what I want to do is make sure that I've got these centered right. So what I don't want to do is to wind up with these seams being offset like that. I want them to match up. So let's see if I can get myself enough room here to do that. Okay. So what I do is just make kind of a judgment as to how close I am, and then see I'm a little bit off, so I'm going to slide over. It may not be perfect, but I want it to be pretty close. Right about like that. I think that's going to be good. Okay, now I can pin my ends together. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to go to the other end and do the same thing. Okay, so now I just need to pin the rest of this and then sew it, and then do the same to the other side. All right, I am getting ready to add on the outer border. I've already added the inner borders on, and they are this pink fabric with the white hearts on it. And I have, this is directional, so I put the hearts all facing, with the points of the heart, the bottom of the hearts are facing towards the quilt. And I did the long horizontal, and I'm going to do the same with the outer border. Now the outer border is this teal daisy, which is also directional. You'll notice the stems are all facing one direction. So I want those to go, the stems to be facing the quilt too. Now I measured this quilt through the middle, and it is 56.5 inches long, so I have measured out my border, and I have marked with a pin where the 56.5 inches is. So I'm going to go ahead and use that as my starting point. And I'm going to go ahead and pin this to the side, right there where that pin is. And I'm going to find the middle of the quilt as well as the border and put a pin in there, and pin those middles together, and then I will pin out from that point. And hopefully everything will come out even. Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to trim off the extra. So I have this extra border here. I'm going to trim that off and go to the opposite end of the quilt and do the same thing. I'll measure it, pin it, and sew it on. Here is the final quilt top. It's all sewn together. This is a photograph where my husband is holding it up for me so that I could take a picture. So it isn't the best photo, but it's the best I can do at the moment. And the color is a bit washed out. There is a lot more color in this quilt than what this is showing. So I am dealing with a lack of a design wall or a good place to hang a quilt, as well as poor lighting. But as you can see, this is put together just like the diagram on the pattern, and it all came together pretty well. I didn't have much trouble with it at all, so I'm really happy with it, and wish I could quilt it right away, but that's going to have to wait. So I hope you enjoyed this series, this quilt along on the flower garden quilt, and I'd love to see your photos. So if you'd like to share those on this channel, then you can email them to me at sunrisequiltstudio@gmail.com, and I will post them in a future video. Okay, so that is it for the flower garden quilt. It is all put together. The photo that you've seen is my husband holding the quilt up for me so I could take a photo of it. Don't have a design wall anymore. I don't have any place to hang it. So as long as the quilts aren't too big, he can hold them for me while I take a picture. So we'll just go with that for right now. So anyway, this was a fun quilt. I am really pleased with the way it turned out. The quilting process now is next, and that is going to be several months down the line, maybe even a year or longer, until I could get my long arm set up, and that won't be until we get the new house built, which I don't know when that's going to be. So we'll just wait and see. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this series. It's a different type of quilt than what I've done on this series before, and I'm pleased with the way it turned out, and I hope you all enjoy it. So in the meantime, I hope you're all staying safe and healthy, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. For more quilting ideas, click on the video links, and to keep up with my latest projects, click on the subscribe button. I hope to see you again soon.